Welcome to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. How do we learn to truly thrive together? How do we stay connected to our authentic selves, each other, and our purpose as a team, especially when challenged? How do we unlock the deeper levels of group intelligence? Enjoy this episode of the Connected Teamwork Podcast and learn practical tools to evolve the connectedness of your team to its next level.
Welcome, Connected Teamwork Podcast, where we help leaders, teams connect more deeply to themselves, each other, and their purpose. I'm your host, Hilke Faber. I'm here together with Carson Heddy. Carson, how are you today?
I'm wonderful, Hilke. Good to see you as always, my friend.
It's always good to see you, sit with you, and to see you, and to sit in this place of thinking about how do we make communication in teams, between humans in general, higher quality. And what I find in my own relationship, starting with my husband and then with the teams that I work with and my family and friends, that when I communicate with care, it becomes caring. And when I'm careless, all kinds of mayhem starts to happen around me. So communication is such an important thing. And I think about great leaders like Lincoln. He was able to succinctly change things and have an impact. There's one particular quote I'm paraphrasing. He said, well, those that like slavery, let them become slaves themselves and then make an assessment if they really want to do it. This is a good idea. In those kinds of ways. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We've been working through the connected communication practices, 12 practices. And today we're talking about connected communication practice number 7, which is about keeping it Zen, short, and simple. And then keep away from the temptation from our ego, which I call the crocodilian brain, to meander and preach and halt court and go on forever and ever. So we're going to explore today, how do we keep it Zen, short, and simple? Why is that important? And what does it require from us to do that? And I'll start off with a little example. So I've been traveling. And last week I was in the Netherlands, and I don't know about you, but my body, especially across 9 time zones, or these time zones, starts these weird things where my brain needs a little bit of time to ground. And my husband often is a recipient of that. So, I was going to have lunch with him on sounds very fun, but we were going to go out for lunch on Saturday, and I could feel my brain not being completely settled. And he asked me a question, and I'll leave it out there what it was. And I gave him this very long answer. And he looked at me and he said, is that what you mean by that? And I then talked for another 3 minutes. At which point he looked at me like, are you here? And then I remember something I've learned in my practices, which is this little acronym, WAIT. Why am I talking? Why am I talking? And I know that when I am not in a place of connecting with myself and the other, I tend to just sputter things out. And we can call that being authentic, but I would just call that being careless. So to me, being authentic means that I go a little deeper. If you put me on an electroencephalograph, my brain waves go from many, very fast to much simpler. So tell us about this, Carson. What is it like for you being Zen in what you say?
I love this practice, Hilke, because I too have lived on both sides of it. And still, this is an area that I work on in myself. In fact, it reminds me of a time where I had a culture betterment committee with my team. And I was grateful for the, kind of the spokesperson of that group because she was able to tell me that one of the things that I needed to work on was that I tend to over communicate. And so just finding times to communicate in more of a digest style and to do it in a more digestible way as well. Because, we tend to over communicate sometimes when we care, when we're really passionate about something, but we can do it in a way that is becomes cumbersome for the recipient. So I've definitely been the person who has talked too much because I cared so much about the topic. And I wanted to add value. I mean, it comes from a good place when we do this often, or when other people do it. It comes from a good place because we have this predisposition to want to explain the context. We're close to it. We're intimate with it. So we want people to understand the full picture in the way that we do. But again, we still only have our own vantage point, and that's why over explaining isn't necessarily going to have the desired effect. Sometimes, we do it because we want to be seen as well. We want other people to understand us. But the reality is the throwing in more words doesn't actually bring more clarity. Sometimes it creates fog in the situation. So, when I think about this discussion today, and the idea that conversation actually means changing together, the criticality of that piece and communication and connected teamwork, it reminds me the importance of making sure that one person isn't carrying the room. There's got to be rhythm. There's got to be discipline, in the way that we're conducting ourselves in conversations, because frankly, a lot of times the most powerful thing that we can do is to say the clearest thing that we know, but stop talking long enough for the other person to receive, think about it, and respectfully respond.
Beautiful. I love that you just paused there, practicing Zen right there. So when is a good time? When do we know it's time to just not say anything or time to stop? And if I reflect back on this Saturday's lunchtime conversation, truth be told is, I don't know whether you've ever had this experience, but I felt like I was there, but I also wasn't there. Like, I don't know, there's a lot that I processed from the week, workshops and travels and things that were happening in the world. And I had in mind that I was going to have this very connecting experience with my husband who I hadn't seen for 10 days, not 10 years, 10 days. And so what I did was I cut off a part of myself, which happened to be most of me. Most of me was feeling somewhat unsettled. So authentic and Zen would have been, hey, I know we're here. And truth be told is I feel somewhat unsettled. I think I have some travel work PTSD from the last week. How are you? Right? That would have been honest. Now, that I got to that sentence about Saturday around 5 p.m. So about 4 hours later. Now, Zen to me, so Zen requires me to, first of all, be really honest with myself. Like, what is this really about? Because when I'm not honest, what I was doing at that time was I was basically communicating, trying to talk around or make some kind of performance. And I do this in meetings too. Like I know I have a conversation ahead with a business partner about a product we're putting out together, and there's some feedback on that stuff. And I want to expand and expound as opposed to, hey, I'm concerned about this feedback. What do you think? So what's the time to stop talking? I ask myself this question, wait, why am I talking? Is this still value add? Does the person need to have, and is this value add at this time? And is this what needs to be said right now?
Yeah.
What about you?
I find that it's rarely, if ever, in my younger days, it might have been more from a place of ego. but now it's more when I'm not necessarily feeling like my best self. So I completely relate, Hilke, to what you just said. You know, you're a little foggy. You've been doing a lot of traveling. You're not 100% there. There's stress and strain that is, you know, kind of weighing on you in those moments. And I very similarly as well can relate with, you know, conversations that I have with my wife. Sometimes I have to let her know, hey, today was chaotic. I am not at my best, but, you know, here goes type of conversation. I find too, a lot of times when I talk too much, it is a place of nervousness. I really want to get this right. You know, I'm meeting with a new manager, or I'm meeting with a new customer executive or a new team, or I'm doing a project. Recently, I was asked to do a project completely out of my comfort zone. And it was because of, you know, this group internally became aware of me and my presentations and presentation style and asked me to present to their team. But it was not the type of group that I work with on a daily basis. But I said yes. It goes back to the old Richard Branson quote of, like, you know, even if you're not 100% sure about, you know, saying yes to a project or a role, say yes and then figure it out as it goes. And I did that. But what I try to do is very much attune to what looks like a win to this group. But when I catch myself talking too much, a lot of times it's because I want to make sure that what I'm saying is really resonating. And if you're not getting the head nods or the like affirmation in the moment, like sometimes there's this internal feeling within me like, wow, I just got to say one more thing and maybe that'll get the head nod. Maybe that'll get the affirmation that I'm seeking. So it's not anything about the recipient or the other person in the conversation. It's all about what's in me. And it's not a conscious ego-driven decision, but it's a, wow, I'm nervous about this. I really want to make sure I get it right. I really want to make sure I sell myself in this situation. And I find that's when we tend to oversell, is because we're nervous and we want to make sure we don't leave anything left out. We do it in job interviews. We do it when we're meeting a new person. We've all done this. We even do it sometimes when we're talking to our kids. You know, we're disciplining a kid and it's like we almost feel like we have to sell it to them because we got to really get this parenting moment right. That's when when I talk too much is when I'm really trying to oversell it, and I'm nervous that I'm going to get it wrong.
I try to oversell it. Become a zealot when I try to oversell it. That's, I think, the tagline I'm getting from this, and I resonate with this too. To me, that Zen requires bravery. So it requires me to sit here in the discomfort of not knowing what you're going to say and not having to manipulate or control it. So we've all been in this situation. I've been in this situations. We're saying something that's very important to us, so we want it to go well, quote unquote, and the other person just looks at us like a stone wall, or worse, with raised eyebrows or something like that. You know, it's the receptive energy is not there. Then we have a choice. Like, what's of service now? And what I find in that moment, it can be simply stop and just say, how does this land with you? What do you think? And then nothing. Not 5 questions, but 1 or 2 questions. And then sit in the silence. I had this experience last week when I was working with a team. And they were very used to talking alongside each other and not getting anywhere. Okay, think about everybody staying on the same side of the tennis net, just lopping balls into the nowhere. And that was happening for about 5 minutes on a topic they were all very passionate about, that they had chosen to talk about. And so I was a facilitator, and they were looking at me as if the person on the other side of the net. And so I said, okay, what's happening right now? Silence. Another person lobbed another idea. And I said, okay, so what's happening right now? And what would you like to see happen? Another person had an. So it wasn't. We weren't getting. At some point in that silent, like, it's almost like the group mind activated, and somebody said, "Huh, yeah, I would like us to find a way to find some common ground." Ah. Next question: how could you go about creating that? Imagining, because I'm not facilitating this conversation. This is your conversation. And this is what you do when you are together. So that's the power of Zen to me, like letting that sort of vacuum happen. And in the vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum, it will fill it. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to talk more after the break about the power of those Zen silences. See you after the break.
You are listening to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Do you want to learn more about building the next level of connectedness in your team? Please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
So silence. What have you noticed, Carson, about silence in conversation?
Communication is mostly about creating the space for perspectives. And I liked, Hilka, how you framed up what was silence and how some of these lobs could be reframed. What are we here for? What are we trying to achieve? I often have a habit of looking at, because at the top of my meeting, it will often say the subject of the meeting. And sometimes I'll have an agenda. And I try to get regrounded in that, sometimes multiple times in a conversation. Are we achieving this? Are we talking about that topic, or are we going awry? And sometimes for a leader, it isn't about dominating the room. We're having, guiding or leading the conversation. It's about making sure that the right conversations are being had. But, I think for some, silence is awkward, because then that's when our minds go into overdrive. Like, so many of us plan the next thing we're going to say, so much so that we're not even listening to what others are saying. We're waiting for that moment, that silence, to give our winning point. And again, that's what we've got to get away from. Silence is a very powerful communication in the room, because that's when we're able to really think, absorb. What are we talking about? Are we on track? Are we on target? And we can't rush to fill the silence just because it is uncomfortable. I think that's where communication really begets the need for silence, is because if we honor the silence, that's where more truth is going to show up. I think that's why a Zen silence is really a sacred pause between the stimulus, agenda, conversation points, people's perspectives, and the response, where understanding has room to breathe.
Love that. Zen silence is a sacred pause between stimulus and response, where truth has room to breathe. That's something we need to write down somewhere. So it takes a lot to be willing to be quiet and not confuse silence with apathy, because the brain wants to do something always, right? And so one way that I find, because we need to work with our own fear of the vacuum is to say, okay, so I'm asking that question. How's that landing with me, with you, or what do you think, or what's of service, or what are we talking about? And I'm still here, and my brain needs something to do, and it's used to thinking about my next response, what I'm going to say next, or or judging the other person, or trying to control something, or come up with a solution. Some of these things are more skillful, some of these things are less skillful, but it's always it's not very my mind is not very used to saying, oh, I'm going to show up being quiet now. So to help this mind that I can see as a child to say it's really okay. I remember going to church and when as a kid, and we would always doing the sermon, which was hard for people to sit through because it's 50 minutes of a guy talking on a pulpit. It's hard to process. You get mints, so you get something to chew on while you're listening. And I thought always that was stupid because I thought so many things were stupid back then. But that's a whole different story. But we can give ourselves a little mint, and the mint that I use is to say I choose to be present. So then at least I'm giving myself something to do. Now, of course, the higher way is probably to not have to do anything and being okay with that. And when I'm not good with that, I can simply remind myself, I'm going to be present. And that's something I can always do. If I need to fill the space, it's simply with being present. And the other person will feel that, usually. Like, I'm here, not somewhere else. I'm right here with you. How do you manage yourself with silence, Carson?
It's hard, specifically when you have strong opinions or you have very relevant experience for the current situation. Hilke, you said some really poignant things earlier about, why the silence is so hard as well. We're sitting there thinking about what we're going to say, but also, forming opinions, and we're judging. I've done all of those things. And I do find as well that, perhaps earlier in my career, as I was paying dues or before I'd really gained any political capital, or as I was trying to climb ladders on a rungs on a ladder, I would be like that. Hey, look at me. Hey, I've got this awesome idea. Listen to me, promote me. As I've gained some wherewithal, I'd like to think, I've gone away from that. And it's less specifically in those meetings. And I call them talking heads. I was one of them. But you see in these meetings, sometimes it can be a meeting of 10, 20, 30 people. But there's always all these people that are talking and, hey, look at this and see me. And we work in an interesting time as well. We work in a time where jobs are being changed. They're being redefined because of what technology can do. And so I think a lot of people are trying to stake their claim, like, hey, my job's really important. What I'm doing is really important. Look at me. I get that, but that also comes from a place of scarcity mindset. And so I think those are the things that make it hard. The things that help me manage the silence in those situations, and frankly, being more quiet now, is I want to gain a more informed opinion. But I also want to earn credibility in a space where if somebody really wants my opinion, they ask for it. They're going to come to me. And that I hold a lot more, in higher regard than feeling this compulsion to need to be seen in any given conversation or call. Doesn't mean I get it right all the time. But, we've talked about this before on the show. Like, we don't have to be the smartest person in the room. We just have to make sure that we can receive the message. Sometimes we are evolving that message in a way that we can convey it to others on our team, colleagues, direct reports, whatever the case may be. But a lot of times it's, how do we put out the right thought-provoking question and let our team grapple with it? It isn't about filling the silence with something that says, hey, I'm smart. Hey, I'm the leader. Look at me. I think the best leaders create space for other people's intelligence. And that is how we need to look at the silence.
I hear in what you're saying, Carson, staying focused on what is of service to the higher goal that we're here for, and being aware when my ego gets a little insecure and starts blabbering to grab attention, which
You always remember the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And I empathize, in the AI era, like I hear it's low firing, low hiring. So things are changing. People are like, how do I keep my job? Well, one is to run a campaign and get eyes on me. So maybe we don't make that bad. More like, yeah, I understand that. I understand that within myself. I understand that within you. Now, what else could I put my attention to? Don't make that wrong. Maybe the way to work with that is to give that a little bit of time. It's like, okay, do that a little bit. Just see how it feels. Now also choose something else and see what that's like. Make it an experiment. Because in that way we also become less absolute. Otherwise we start judging the so-called talking heads on the other side of the table. We're like, yeah, okay, I've done it, I'll probably do it again, it's okay. So go ahead.
I think the more inclusive we are in these situations, and the more that we proactively look for the other people that we want or need in the boat, or the other people that are in the boat already, what are their unique skills and strengths and superpowers? How can I help deliver wins to those that I work with? How can I because we're not going to achieve goals by ourselves. And so even in this era, even in this day and age where, I'm guilty of those very things that you just said. I've built campaigns that I know will amplify my own brand, but I'm doing it in a way that I'm taking feedback from leadership or from peers and building something with them that will ultimately be executable and deliver incredible outcomes, but you take everybody along with you. It can't be look at me, it's hey, look at us. And I think if your communication serves that purpose, those are the types of things that matter. And frankly, I've often found a lot of value too in leaning in to the discomfort in those conversations. If you see some people that are out there doing the, hey, look at me, I have reached out to them in the past and I've said, hey, tell me more. Clearly you're passionate about this, or you've got a system that works for you. I would love to learn from that. Even if honestly, right out of the cuff or off the cuff, maybe I don't really want to spend time with that person out of the gate, but I've been pleasantly surprised by having a conversation with this person and showing like, hey, we're not on opposite sides here. We're actually trying to achieve the same thing. How can we help each other? How can we build on that? That's actually one of the areas of our appraisal. Personal results is in there, but there are two other cornerstones of our appraisal, how we're appraised for impact and the outcomes that we drive. It's how did we contribute to the work of others, but how did we also take the work of others and build on it? And so I think it shows the criticality of being inclusive in how we approach these situations. I may have a gut feeling of judgment in a situation when I see this, hey, look at me. But a lot of times it's because I'm looking at myself and I'm saying, gosh, I really wish I was saying something smart right now that everybody was talking about, So looking at that in myself, realizing that maybe this is an invitation to come to the table and break bread with this person as opposed to staying at arm's length. How can we learn together? How can we elevate each other? If we look at these situations like that, Hilke, I think they make us all better.
Thank you for that. Silence can be the unpaid but always welcome facilitator that brings us together. So it's always there. It's just, do we trust it? Do we trust that silence to bring us together? Because in the silence, we often find what is needed. underneath the noise of your or my or both of our egos, what's this really about? That's where insight and I would say love is born. That's what I noticed last weekend also. When I became quiet, interestingly, we were reconnecting. This was the Connected Teamwork podcast for today. We've been working on connected communication practice number 7. Keep it Zen, short and simple, and play tennis. Exchange. See you next time at the Connected Teamwork podcast, where we help leaders and team connect more deeply to their innate potential. I was here with Carson Heddy. Carson, say anything by way of closing?
Remember that the silence is where conversation transforms. That is where, for once, we're not just waiting to speak. We're actually making room to change together.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. See you next time at the Connected Teamwork podcast.